There we go. So David, we'd love to hear about bases and military spending. Is it bad?
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Again, thank you, Sean. Thank you for everyone who's here. It's really a pleasure to get to meet you, and I look forward to engaging over I don't know, the next hour we have, which don't worry, I'm not going to speak for an hour. In fact, I would love to make this as interactive as possible. So I will stop at a few points and see if there are questions and feedback and thoughts. Because really, I think a meeting like this, and it sounds like your second hour is certainly dedicated to this, should be an organizing opportunity. Hopefully I'll share some information and perspectives that are helpful to you, but I see it as a mutual organizing and strategizing opportunity. So I look forward to spending our time together, strategizing and thinking together and building together, because I must say I'm very inspired by your coalition and a lot of what I want to talk about tonight, certainly from the strategic end of things, is about building bigger coalitions. And I'm going to invite you individually, and it's part of the groups you're a part of, and as part of the coalition or coalitions you're a part of, to join some of the coalition work I'm involved in right now. First, though, I do think it is helpful, especially in this moment of such horrific violence, of genocide, of war, maybe just to take a moment to ground ourselves and to think about what brings each of us to this work and how we're feeling in this moment. I was taken aback a couple nights ago walking with a friend and realizing that amid so much feeling and emotion that I've been experiencing in the last 6 months, and in many ways for much longer, that I haven't had many opportunities to share those feelings in a certain way. So yeah, maybe everyone could just take a moment to think both about how you're feeling about matters of war and the taxes we pay, or some of us probably don't pay, but the taxes that our government asks us to pay, so much of which goes to war, and what motivates you. And then I wonder if anyone is inspired, maybe you could share a word or two about either how you're feeling or what motivates you to do the work you do, and the work it sounds like you're going to be doing next week. And when I say share, I guess I mean, hopefully everyone has the ability to write something in the chat. If so, I'd love, even just a word: angry, outraged,
devastated,
or devastated. Yes. Sharing it verbally also is even better. Overwhelmed.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too.
Couple people feeling overwhelmed. I relate to that.
I feel outraged, I think, and then we're trying to figure out at this organization, which is opposed to nuclear weapons, how to tie it in, how to tie in how nuclear weapons enable our role as kind of an international bully, and how that enables like smaller bullies like Israel to do what they're doing in Gaza. So we're trying to make these links.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's a really important piece of what we collectively need to do to make linkages between Gaza and nuclear weapons, between Gaza and the military industrial complex, and the nuclear weapons industrial complex, which I would say is an important segment of the larger military industrial complex. heartbroken, low expectations, still hopeful. Maybe hopefully feel free to continue to share. In fact, let me see if one or two other people want to share before I leap off. Yeah, I think I relate to all the feelings shared. Feel free to continue to share in the chat. I think I'm going to share some some data and again some of the work I'm involved in now. But I think if there's one thing I want to leave you with, I think it comes down to one or two interlinked ideas. And I, of course, have felt profound despair and low expectations at times, and still tremendously hopeful. And all in all, I have to say that I feel like this is a really unprecedented moment of transgenerational anti-war, anti-militarist activism that we're seeing on a global basis that has arisen in response to Israel's genocide in Gaza. Sean, maybe I think there's someone on a phone that maybe we could mute them. Thanks. So again, yeah, I think this is really an unprecedented moment that we have to seize on, an unprecedented moment of anti-war, anti-militarist activism, the likes of which I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime, eclipsing, the height of the anti-war protests leading up to the US-led war in Iraq, that we have to seize on this moment and build an increasingly large, increasingly powerful, and increasingly sophisticated movement, global movement to stop wars and dramatically cut global military spending, beginning here, of course, in the United States, which represents somewhere around almost half of all global military spending. And of course, we need to do this, as all of you know, to take on the real security threats facing us, the real existential threats facing us, those of global warming, of nuclear weapons, of war itself, as well as the existential threats of poverty and hunger, racism and patriarchy, and other profound forms of oppression. To do this, I think, and this is going to be the focus of a lot of what I'll share with you as we proceed, I think we need to do one really important thing. And a group of people that I've been working with over the last 2 years, a big network of people agrees, and that's why we've been working together, because we agree that to stop wars, to dramatically cut the US military budget in particular, and to struggle against global warming, to advance numerous movements across sectors that we're involved in, we have to take on the military-industrial complex. We have to take on the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex has been something of an elephant in the room in many of the movements that we are a part of. And we haven't done enough to identify it, to call it out, to target it, to undermine it, and ultimately to seek to dismantle it. And that's what I'm interested in doing, working together with other people, as I have been for the past couple of years, to take on, undermine, and ultimately dismantle the military-industrial complex. Now, I do not have the answer for how to dismantle the military-industrial complex, nor does anyone in our network, but we have together generated some really exciting strategies, tactics, and campaigns to do just that. Let me come back to the military-industrial complex, and first start with its economic base, really. And that is the money that fuels the economic, the economic base that fuels the military-industrial complex, which is part of what, or much of what, you will be taking on next week, it sounds like, in your campaign to raise awareness about military spending amid the tax deadline. Let me just share one. Many of you probably know the National Priorities Project. Often when I'm speaking about matters of war and peace, the military budget, I point to this counter. Hopefully everyone can see the counter on their screen with the numbers ticking off by the second. This is money that the US government, US taxpayers have spent on the so-called war on terror since October 11th, October 7th, 2001. Upwards of $9 trillion, $9 trillion. And we're continuing, that is US taxpayers, the US government are continuing to spend millions of dollars by the second on this ongoing war on terror and a larger system of, to now, seemingly endless wars that we must stop. Sometimes I think I really can't say much more that would be more powerful than just watching these dollars disappear before our eyes, which of course should bring tears to our eyes for a number of reasons, beginning with the deaths involved in the war on terror, but also how else we could be spending these trillions of dollars. And, $1 trillion, that alone is incomprehensible. $9 trillion. And this is just money spent on the wars waged since 2001. Total military spending, it's important to point out, total military spending, including the Department of Homeland Security, Veterans Affairs, total military spending exceeds $20 trillion since 2001. Upwards of $21 trillion. The figures get so large, you lose track of the words. But it's important to not lose track of the numbers. Let me share a few more resources again that I'm guessing some of you have seen, but in case you haven't, I think they're incredibly helpful and have come out just in the last day or two. Let's see if it will let me. Okay, there we go. I will come back to Eisenhower, to Ike. The argument, of course, in the title being that Eisenhower was, of course, exactly right about the military-industrial complex, about warning us and about urging us to take it on. I'm sure many of you are aware of the overall arc of US military spending, war spending, Pentagon spending. This is just the Pentagon itself, just military spending, which is only a part of total US war and military spending, as all of you well know, because they hide some of the money in the Department of Energy budget. That is the money for nuclear weapons, among other money that's hidden in other budgets. So it's important to point out that while current total Pentagon spending, including nuclear weapons, has exceeded the heights of the Cold War and is almost at the highest levels ever, actual total military spending is far higher than the approximately $900 billion that the United States is set to spend in the current fiscal year, 2024. $900 billion is a figure, or high 800 billions is what is often cited, but that really is only a portion of the total military war spending. Winslow Wheeler, an expert on Pentagon spending, for the last fiscal year, brings the total to $1.4 trillion. $1.4 trillion. I use all the numbers because research has shown that it is more effective to show people the actual numbers, the digits, the zeros, than to just give them the number trillion, which of course, again, is, or billion.
David, are you able to go into the slideshow view?
Oh, funny. Yes, for me, but it is. Are you stuck on my first screen?
Yeah.
Had that happen before. That's a shame. I don't know why Zoom does that sometimes. Yeah, I was on this screen.
You might just be able to click along with the left-hand tab. That would be fine.
Yeah, okay. Not ideal, but hopefully this is better.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay. So total war spending, military spending, and something you in some ways could call defense spending. So that is this figure includes the Department of Homeland Security, which in theory defends the United States, of course, the border industrial complex and other elements of the Department of Homeland Security, of course, do not provide defense or security in any respect in my mind. National Priorities Project, which again I showed you the counter a moment ago, just came out with its annual tax receipt, showing that on average, the average U.S. taxpayer paid last year $5,109 for all costs associated with militarism. This has a similar calculation as Winslow Wheeler, including Department of Veterans Affairs, nuclear weapons, and Department of Homeland Security, as well as money hidden in the budget for the Department of State and interest on past military spending. I think in some ways the $5,000 roughly that on average US taxpayers paid to support militarism, it's a little hard to grasp, but I think these slides make it a little easier to grasp what that means exactly. Spend more on militarism than on Medicare and Medicaid combined. Now, strictly looking at the Pentagon itself, the military, the average taxpayer spent almost $3,000, and by comparison, spent $346 for K-12 education in this country. An order of magnitude more spent on militarism, spent on the Pentagon military. Pentagon contractors, if we narrow in even further on the money that Congress has appropriated, taxpayer money that Congress has appropriated for Pentagon contractors, that is private military contractors, corporations, we reach almost $2,000 for the average US taxpayer. Compare that to just a little bit over $500 invested in food stamps. Lockheed Martin alone, the largest weapons manufacturer and military contractor in the United States and on Earth, for that matter, received on average $249. Compare that to the child tax credit, which received a mere $110 for the average US taxpayer. Mentioned Border Patrol, ICE, and the Border and Customs and Border Patrol received $110. Compare that to $14 for the average taxpayer for wildfire management, which of course is of interest to people living in Washington State, I'm sure, as people living in California like me and across up and down the West Coast. One more, SpaceX, Elon Musk's lovely company, received $12 from the average US taxpayer last calendar year, actually. And compare that to a mere $11 invested in energy efficiency and renewable energy programs. We'll come back to Eisenhower. I do just think it's important to remember while thinking about where the money goes and where it hasn't gone. I think we can remember Eisenhower's words, which I'm guessing all of you are familiar with, where he described military spending as a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, from those who are cold and are not clothed. We need to keep our eyes firmly there, but especially amid genocide, we need to, of course, remember where the money is going, not just to private contractors, weapons manufacturers, but where those weapons, of course, are ending up and what they are, of course, doing. Again, figures that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but the Cost of War Project has provided the best documentation of the human and financial costs, impacts of the post 9/11 wars, showing that, again, upwards of $9 trillion has been plowed into the war machine, just the wars themselves, not the basic operations of the US military and the nuclear weapons complex. So this doesn't include nuclear weapons spending, the $9 trillion. This is just money invested in wars since 2001. Of course, in this time, upwards of 15,000 US military personnel dead, another approximately the same number, private military contractors dead. Of course, these numbers pale in comparison to the total number of Iraqis and Afghans, as well as Pakistanis, people in Yemen, Libya, who have died in the post 9/11 wars. The Cost of War Project has estimated that 4.5 million people have died in these wars. 4.5 million people. And of course, I'm sure you are well aware of where our money and our weapons are going now, in the upwards of 33,000 people who have died in Gaza in the last 6 months alone, which of course are not included in these figures. 38 million displaced, in addition to the deaths in the 5 most violent wars the United States has been engaged in since 2001. The numbers, the trillions of dollars spent, the millions of people dead just in the past 22 plus years can be completely overwhelming and, of course, demoralizing and depressing, and they should depress us profoundly. And we shouldn't get lost in the numbers. The numbers, of course, can be numbing. Sometimes, often, I think it's helpful to come back to just a single life, a single death, thinking about what our investments in war have meant. A single life. The Irish poet Pedrig Otama has a poem, The Pedagogy of Conflict, which I think, to me, brings this home powerfully, where in part of the poem, he says, "When I was a child, I learned to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But these days, I've been counting lives. So I count 1 life, 1 life, 1 life, 1 life, 1 life. Because each time is the first time that that life has been taken." I'm going to stop there for a moment and just see if there are any questions about the figures I shared or anything I shared at the outset. And then I'll share a little bit more about the taking on the military-industrial complex, attempting to dismantle the military-industrial complex, and then open things up for more conversation.
I wanted to ask something.
Great.
So did you say that this 9 trillion does not include nuclear weapons? Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. The $9 trillion figure, upwards of 9 trillion, as we saw, is just the money that was appropriated from Congress, taken from us, stolen from us, as Eisenhower implied, and poured into the wars since 2001, since the US government invaded Afghanistan.
And nuclear weapons is how much? Do you know?
In that time period? That's a very good question. Does anyone else on the call know the answer to that? How much money has the US government invested in nuclear weapons since 2001? I know you're calling attention to the $2 trillion the US government is set to spend in coming decades to supposedly modernize or upgrade, which is a sick thought, our stock of nuclear weapons. But does anyone know how much?
I think maintenance of the arsenal is around 100 billion a year. But I don't have an exact figure.
That yeah, that would be a good one to look into. The Department of Energy's budget, of course, is only part of the spending. It would be a one place to start, but yeah, great question. And I'm going to try to look it up, and we'll share it with Sean if I come up with an answer. Looks like Kit has a question.
Yeah, one thing that concerns me is the open talk of war with China and the open talk of war with Russia. And yet, I've been to China. I have no reason to go to war with China. I don't really get it. We have General Minihan, you probably know him, who openly speaks about a coming nuclear war within 2 years. It's like, Kennedy would have fired him immediately. And then I think it's Admiral Aquilino. I don't know how to say his name, maybe you know, but he's also speaking openly of war, nuclear war, and it kind of just runs, through our press, and we don't get any reaction. And then the third thing I'll say, and maybe you can comment on this, there was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal who said we should show the world that we can win a nuclear war. It's like, the insanity. I mean, this stuff, it's like I'm left speechless. I just go like, and final thing I guess I'll say is, I could keep on talking, but I won't, is that when I ask people, I say, well, how much do you think we're spending on nuclear weapons? And the only response I get that's close is they go, a lot? They have no idea. No idea. Just totally secret. Anyway, there maybe some comments on that, David, would be good.
Yeah, I'll try. I think just to start with where you ended up, I think you're exactly right. And research and experience of numerous activist groups has shown repeatedly that people have no clue how much the US government, that is US taxpayers, are spending on war and the military on an annual basis. No clue. And especially in comparison to other forms of spending, they think, the US government spends astronomical figures on foreign aid, when of course that's a tiny, minuscule part of the overall budget. I think the talk of war with China and of nuclear war is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. And indeed, I think a number of admirals and generals should be fired. But it speaks to the power of the Pentagon, which I think we really should think of as a fourth branch of government, and the power of the military-industrial complex, that the president today doesn't fire supposed leaders like that. I think it's incredibly dangerous, the talk of war with China. The threat of China, I think it is critical to say, has been exaggerated dramatically. And what's going on is really a kind of fear mongering that's being used to drive up military budgets. This is the military industrial complex at work. A whole infrastructure of people within the US military, but also, of course, importantly, outside the US military, and think tanks and media, and part of the contractors themselves, as well as their really an army of lobbyists who lobby Congress on an annual basis. Upwards of 800 lobbyists the weapons manufacturers possess, pay for, with our money, of course, to lobby for more of our money. And all of this is, of course, frighteningly making a war with China more likely, a war with China and or Russia, and a war that could, as all of you know, all too easily become a nuclear war. And then, of course, there's the potential that next week we could see a nuclear device exploded in a context of war for the first time since 1945. And I say that because the threat of a war involving the United States, Israel, and Iran is greater today than it's been since the end of the Trump administration. Many things to be frightened about, and we can't let that demoralize us. We have to let that inspire us to struggle harder and make sure these horrific potential futures never come to pass. I just got on my soapbox. So let me again invite you to ask questions. I don't know if Sean, did you see if there were questions in the chat, or Mary, I see has a question.
I wanted to say that one thing we've experienced is what people who know more about communication theory and all that than I do have pointed out. There are certain terms that are intended to shut us down, to intimidate us, and make us feel like we have no right to challenge all this. And one of my favorites, this one came from Tom Hartman this morning. He called it treason. That if a person had the point of view that we should not be spending more arms in Ukraine, that was treason. And so any kind of point of view that doesn't conform to either the Trumpian or the Biden foreign policy is called treasonous, and that frightens people. So it makes it harder for us to organize, because there's this process of gaslighting us. We're called the crazies. That to question our foreign policy, they have a lot of labels. So I think it's a good idea for us to recognize that those labels can and will be thrown at us, and try to find ways that we can catch our breath, as I'm trying to do right now, and persist in challenging our foreign policy and insist on our right to do it.
I think that's beautifully put. And I think we have to push back against those sorts of critiques powerfully. Usually, almost always, they're being made by people who have been wrong about every war and pretty much every matter of foreign policy, certainly in the last 2 decades, and often far longer. It's important to point out that the post 9/11 wars, of course, have been catastrophic failures, beginning with for the people of Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan and far beyond, Libya, Somalia, Yemen, Syria. They have been catastrophic failures for the United States because of the death and destruction that we have brought around the world, and because, of course, the death and destruction and injury, disability that has been brought home to the United States by members of the military themselves and family members of people in the military, as well as the massive diversion of our taxpayer dollars that could have been used. What could we have done with the $9 trillion, the upwards of $9 trillion? Imagine what we could have done to take on global warming, to build a clean, green energy infrastructure in this country, to end homelessness and hunger, to make college free for all, to provide universal health care, among many other things that we could have done with $9 trillion. Again, when one stops to think about it, it should really make us all weep. Let me share a few more thoughts. Again, some of the work I've been involved in trying to take on the military-industrial complex, because Mary, what you were just sharing, of course, those are the voices of the military-industrial complex, the voices of the military contractors, the think tanks funded by the military contractors, the so-called leaders in the US military. And let me just be clear that when I criticize and critique the US military and US government policy, I am criticizing policy and those who are shaping that policy, the very top of the US military and Pentagon infrastructure, not members of the military, the vast majority of whom I see as victims of the military-industrial complex and the larger war system. So let me, share a couple more thoughts, and I'm sure there are additional questions, again, feel free to ask questions about any of the data, statistics I'm sharing, or the ideas. Hopefully Zoom, or my ability to use Zoom, will cooperate in allowing me, and I'm not going to play with the full screen, but hopefully you can see it largely. Okay, it is advancing at least. So in the past 2 years, I've been working together with a really broad group of people in activist organizations, advocacy organizations in DC, veterans groups, academics, people in think tanks that are not funded by the military-industrial complex, among others, journalists and others, who have, as I said at the outset, come to believe that we have to take on the military-industrial complex, that it is the elephant in the room that is blocking, inhibiting, preventing us from making progress in our struggles to end ongoing wars and prevent future wars, as well as to cut the size of the military budget and to abolish nuclear weapons. We must take on the military-industrial complex. And we've come to, as I mentioned, we've been working together to develop new strategies to take on and undermine the military-industrial complex. This is a graphic that we've put together that tries to depict the basic relationship involved in the military-industrial complex, the iron triangle relationship between Congress, which of course takes our money and turns it over to the Pentagon, again, to the tune of more than $1 trillion a year. Pentagon, the military, in turn, turns over about half of those funds to private contractors, that is weapons manufacturers and other Pentagon contractors, who then earn tremendous profits from our taxpayer monies, which they turn into lobbying dollars, money that they use to employ K Street lobbyists, literal lobbyists, as well as to buy advertising, make campaign donations, buy off think tanks that promulgate the kinds of ideas we heard about from Mary and others previously, that only further fuel the process to inflate Pentagon budgets, overall military and war budgets, and keep this cycle, this self-perpetuating and ultimately profoundly corrupt cycle of the military-industrial complex going. We've agreed, this broad network, on a few things. Again, that we need to take on the military-industrial complex directly, that we need to dramatically improve our strategy, and a coordinated strategy, that we have terrific organizations doing great work, coalitions, individual groups doing great work, but all too often they're doing it without even being aware that there are other groups doing similar work, let alone working together. That given the deep pockets of the military-industrial complex, we need to be far better organized and employing far more sophisticated and better strategy to take on and undermine and ultimately dismantle the military-industrial complex. We also have to unite. That goes along with coordinating within our broad anti-war, cut the Pentagon budget, anti-nuclear, anti-imperialist movement. But we have to unite beyond the anti-war peace movement, to unite and make common cause with other movements that are also being blocked, inhibited, held back by the military-industrial complex. Of course, those who are struggling for, free college education or wiping away student debt, those problems could be solved with the money that is being poured into the military-industrial complex on an annual basis. Similarly, universal health care, or investing in a clean, green energy infrastructure. We need to build across movements, create a cross-sectoral movement of movements if we're going to take on and dismantle the military-industrial complex and build the world we want to see. This, of course, will need dramatically scaled up dramatically increased funding, which means dramatically increased ability to raise funds from existing and new sources if we're going to hope to take on the military-industrial complex, given the billions that they're receiving from Congress, that is from taxpayers on an annual basis. And of course, we have to build up the most successful strategies that groups and coalitions and networks are employing today. The dismantling the military-industrial complex network has been involved in addition to developing whole pages and pages of new strategies, tactics, campaigns, ideas to take on the military-industrial complex, has published a guide. There was a reference to language before. It's called the Words About War Matter Guide. It's a language guide for talking about foreign policy and war. This was inspired by a realization that the language of war and foreign policy is part of the problem, a small part, but a significant part of the problem and the struggle that we're engaged in. One example that the guide, and you can find it at wordsaboutwar.org, wordsaboutwar.org. One example, we point to military euphemisms that are frequently tossed around, like collateral damage that we've heard in the past 6 months, horrifically. The very word defense, the defense budget, defense contractors, it's the word that is, when we, those of us in our movement, employ it, we're using the language of the military-industrial complex. We're using the language of the war profiteers, the weapons manufacturers, the merchants of death, far better language, because we're implicitly supporting the idea that a contractor, military contractor, Pentagon contractor provides defense, if we call them a defense contractor. We see this all over the media, including in Russia. Their defense spending plan soars. Hard to describe. Russia's budget as one involving defense. Similarly, the U.S. budget for war it's really, a kind of Orwellian euphemism that has been promulgated among us since the War Department became the Department of Defense shortly after World War II. And that's a Orwellian euphemism we should reject at all costs and instead use terms like war and Pentagon and military to describe budgets and even the department itself, which I generally refer to as just the Pentagon, although War Department works for many. Again, wordsaboutwar.org, happy to answer more questions about it, but you can get the full guide as well as a 2-page version with a slimmed down set of suggestions for speaking about matters of war and peace and foreign policy. We're also trying to understand what today's military-industrial complex looks like. And of course, is not the same military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about when he left office in 1961. This is a very complicated depiction of the military-industrial complex developed to help us identify new strategies and tactics and campaigns to take on the power of the military-industrial complex. Again, this is a much more simplified version of the basic core relationship in the military-industrial complex. The icons that you see in the yellow circles, we're going to make them available. In fact, I forgot to mention, you are actually the first audience that has ever seen this and 5 other graphics that we will be publicly releasing soon, but I'm giving you a little preview. But one of the, I think, helpful things about the project is that the icons you see in the yellow circles will be available on a website where people will be able to make their own illustrations and depictions of the military-industrial complex, or what some call the Mickey Mat today, involving the academia and media and other elements, which certainly form part of the military-industrial complex, but there'll be ways to create your own graphics. This is another depiction that shows the processes that I described earlier, the way in which the military-industrial complex is a self-perpetuating and corrupting system, also of course involving weapons makers and other Pentagon contractors, putting jobs strategically in the states and districts of members of Congress to ensure that they then turn around and continue to plow contracts or plow money into contracts for those contractors. And of course, again, this is not just a corrupt, terrible system in and of itself. It is a system that is fueling and has fueled, long fueled since World War II, war, and an endless war machine with all the death and destruction and displacement and injury and environmental damage that has caused almost entirely, but not entirely, outside the United States. Of course, the death and injury has profoundly affected members of the military and their families. The military-industrial complex has also helped fuel militarization within the United States, specifically in the form of helping to militarize the police, as we've seen so frighteningly in recent years, as well as the militarization of the border and prisons. Won't be able to discuss these in any depth, but because I do want to stop in just a moment and let us continue the conversation and let you ask more questions and offer more comments. I know there's a particular interest, of course, in taking on global warming, global heating, climate change. This is a graphic that shows how the military-industrial complex is helping to fuel global warming, global heating, climate change. I think I just want to end because, of course, it is dangerous to just focus on the problems, and we need to do so much more than that. Beginning with strategizing, as I've suggested, to take on, to undermine, and ultimately to attempt to dismantle the military-industrial complex, but also in doing so to envision the world we want to see, to build the world we want to see. I think the collaboration between dissenters, hopefully a group all of you are aware of, a youth-led, mostly youth of color-led anti-militarist group. They've been collaborating with the Sunrise Movement in really exciting ways. These are some graphics they developed and have been using on social media. Other graphics to call out the war, the merchants of death, the weapons manufacturers, those who are profiting off war, which again, people worldwide have been doing in increasingly powerful ways just in the past 6 months because of the ways in which that is corporations and shareholders and leaders of weapons manufacturers have been profiting off genocide, beginning with the likes of Lockheed Martin. It's also inspired by dissenters in particular by the way in which they are envisioning the world that they want to see, the world in which we fund the future of coming generations and fund the future of the planet. Why don't I stop right here, because I know you have more to talk about in your second hour, and I would like to hear more of your thoughts and questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wanted to bring everybody's attention, and I'll send a copy to Sean so he can help you find it. I just listened to I've heard it before, George Carlin talking about words. He's really great with words. And one of the things he talks about is how, it used to be we would have somebody in World War I called shell shock. And then he talks about the transformation to other words. It's really a great routine. I just stumbled upon it like probably yesterday or today. Again, I've seen it before. But he has several things on words, and that's kind of what Mary was talking about too. We get trapped up in these words. They use it to scare us. And I've talked to people that are just totally frightened about China and nuclear weapons and all this stuff. But you know, I don't know how to get through to people, but you probably know Paul Nietzsche. He was one of the big warmongers for quite some time, for years and years. But after he retired, he wrote an article in the New York Times, I believe, saying, hey, if somebody hit us with a nuclear weapon, it's like, hey, let it go, because this doesn't end well. So anyway, I just want to bring up George Carlin. I'll send that information to Sean. There's some other people that talk about how we change these words to euphemisms. So after a while, we don't know what we're talking about. So that's my 2 cents there. Thanks, David. Appreciate that, and excited about seeing those slides too.
Thank you, Kit. And just real quickly, I do think it's really important to push back against that kind of fear mongering and to call out the xenophobic, anti-Asian dimension of the kind of fear mongering about China in particular, and to point out to people that this is exactly what the same warmongers did during the Cold War. They exaggerated systematically the threat of the Soviet Union in ways that led us into catastrophic wars in Vietnam and Southeast Asia, as well as jacking up the Pentagon budget to astronomical heights amid the Cold War. And they're doing it's the same playbook, and we can't fall for it. Kathy, Patty, and then Joanne.
Yeah, I think we have time for these next 3 questions, and then we'll have to move along. But Kathy, go ahead.
I have a question about in your graphics. I feel like there are all kinds of corporations that are also making billions of dollars on reconstruction. You know, like I've read that they're already signing contracts for like rebuilding in Ukraine after we've paid for all this destruction. You know, then we're gonna have to pay again for rebuilding all this key infrastructure. So I wonder if that figures into your kind of graphics and stuff and arguments.
Surely in the more complicated version, but I think that I'm glad you called my attention to that, and maybe it deserves more attention. So yeah, no, that's really helpful. Patty and then Joanne.
Oh, hi there. So I'm curious about your strategies. I know you don't have a lot of time to do that tonight, but if you have like some simple, I mean, our next week, we've really reached out to different groups, and we're making steps with faith-based groups and certain environment and certain youth groups and colleges. But I'm curious if you have some tips that maybe not tonight, but you can kind of share through Sean, you know, what seems to have worked, and also how many organizations you actually are intertwining with, and if you're doing it statewide, nationally, you know, what are your next steps and visions of where your organization is going, so that maybe we can kind of interweave in that somehow.
I would love that. I would love that. So, and anyone who's interested in getting more involved or having your organization more involved in the dismantling the military industrial complex network can email me at vine@american.edu. I've put a few things in the chat, including the link to wordsaboutwar.org and the poem earlier, but my email is there. I think the most exciting, certainly in this moment, it feels like divestment strategies are increasingly successful and able to generate a lot of enthusiasm among young folks and people across generations. And I think cross-generational organizing is critical. We, of course, can't just depend on sort of the Vietnam era peace activists, or the, you know, I suppose I'm part of, you know, my generation's Vietnam, that is the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, folks who came of age in those movements. But I would quickly, point to divestment, but I would love to pass on additional ideas about strategy. Joanne, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to sarcastically help us understand that FEMA, folks, is on our side.
I went to a FEMA training this weekend and learned that we had nothing to worry about nuclear weapons. And if you're responding in an emergency, and I was being trained to be one of the respondents, these are what they tell you. You just have to stay inside. Limit the amount of time in the area of an incident that is important to limit exposure to radioactive fallout resulting from the explosion. Remain on site until you receive notification that you can leave. You also, let's see if I can get this other page here. You also should go deep inside, distance sheltering and shielding. I mean, go way inside, go inside your bathtub, guys, because that's really much safer than anything else. I got so upset, and so I spoke out that this is totally false information. And interestingly enough, the two people that were leading the session were veterans. And they were, talking as though this is the way it is. You don't be worried about nuclear weapons, for heaven's sakes. But, now that you said something, yes, we do agree with you that this is a little bit modified down so that people aren't afraid. So they both agreed, even though they were spitting out so I just wanted you to know that you can love FEMA and feel very well protected, that everybody's going to be there to help you. Okay. Anyway, I don't know how to get that. I don't know how to get that. This is a national training that they're doing. And I think eventually we have to take on FEMA. I mean, this is totally false information.
Yeah, appreciate the quips, folks. Goo, do you have a question?
Yep, I have pretty quick questions. Thanks for this presentation, David.
This is our last one, though.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, make it short. I'm from South Korea, and then Korea is there's about more than kind of 28,000 U.S. troops there. U.S. spending is $5 billion per year to kind of stations base. Do you have any kind of rough guess how much U.S. spent for these 14 stations? And also maybe part of that is that they also impact what USROK's kind of military drills, more like war games. They spend a lot, and then they also emit a lot of carbon dioxide and kind of greenhouse gases as well. How they trace that amount of emissions? Do they?
In South Korea in particular, or
So overall, it's globally. Yeah.
globally?
Yeah.
So real quickly, I did actually do a calculation of how much US taxpayers are paying to maintain troops and bases in South Korea annually, and it's around $5 to $6 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
$5 to $6 billion a year, which, in the scheme of 9 trillion is nothing, but 5 to 6, I mean, we need to put this in terms people understand. I think, yeah, in terms of a tactic, I think continually pointing to trade-offs, what we're getting, what we're not getting when we spend $5 or $6 billion a year in South Korea. For example, military missions have been, again, a different kind of elephant in the room of the struggle against to take on and take up the challenge of global warming, global heating, because there's been a broad exemption for military missions. And I'm sure most, if not all of you, are well aware that the US military is the largest carbon emitter on the planet from an institutional perspective, with a carbon footprint about the size of, several fairly sizable nations like Sweden and others. But generally speaking, the best source is the Cost of War Project, and one of its directors, Nita Crawford, if you're looking for data and information about military emissions.
All right. Let's thank our guest here. Virtual round of applause. Thank you, David. Appreciate you coming on such short notice and telling us a little bit about your work and research.
Well, thank you. It's really, again, a pleasure to get to meet you and so inspired by all you're doing. So I really appreciate the chance to be part of the conversation, and I'll look forward to working together in a variety of capacities, I hope, in the coming weeks and months. Thanks,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. So just a few more points on military spending. If that wasn't enough, these are points that are going to be available for folks throughout the week. So over half of the federal budget goes to military spending, and the Pentagon for fiscal year 2025 is requesting $900 billion in discretionary spending, as well as the $2 trillion for new nuclear weapons that we know. The Sentinel missile program alone is projected to be around $130 billion. And just to break that down for folks, $130 billion could pay for high-speed rail from Vancouver, Canada to Portland, Oregon, plus breaching the Snake River dams and replacing their services with money to spare. So putting that into context for people.
Can you put those numbers in the chat?
I will share it.
Oh, there.
This
Okay,
is
good.
all going to be
That's it.
available in one
Okay.
toolkit.
Yeah, that's an excellent piece. Yeah.
10 years ago, the military budget, the discretionary budget in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, was $410 billion a year. It has doubled. It has over doubled in the past 10 years. And we're not at war, allegedly. For the $3 billion costs of rebooting new plutonium factories, such as Savannah River, we could double the annual cleanup budget at Hanford. And another fun example for folks, or not so fun, is that NOAA scientists threw an outlandish figure out there for the costs of cleaning up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, estimating that it would start at around $527 million. They said that to make it seem impossible, but meanwhile, we give $3 billion to Israel every year. So this is fundamentally about priorities. And then the last figure I'll let folks know is that 5 years of U.S. military spending could decarbonize the entire U.S. electric grid. 5 years of military spending could greatly help us get out of this climate crisis that we now find ourselves in. So as I mentioned, we have a toolkit. So I sent this out to folks before our call. So what's in here? Those talking points I just mentioned. For folks who are planning to speak at rallies or events, you can access them. We have a one-click letter action that will automatically send an email to your members of Congress. We have a press release template. Thank you, Patty and Mona. We have links to our social media with posts. We have flyers for digital flyers for every event, or nearly every event, thanks to Claire. On top of that, we have a resolution to move the money that organizations can consider passing. Last but not least, we have handouts for the day of. So this has some of those figures that I mentioned, like the Hanford budget, high-speed rail, the Sentinel missile, military spending, and then there is a half sheet. So this is available to folks for Tax Day to Earth Day. We have
Ron, you did an excellent job. I just have to tell you, it really,
Yeah, it was.
And what's so great too is you don't, if you keep scrolling down, you get your individual flyers for each district. So that was brilliant too. So now I just have one question about who's going to do the overall press release to Seattle Times, Yakima Herald, and Spokane Review.
So I did blast a list out to some local reporters this morning. It is by no means comprehensive. It's just what I had through WPSR. So I want to encourage folks who are, particularly folks who are doing and organizing local events, to also contact your local reporters. So use that press release template. The more they hear from folks, I think the better on this. Some of those some folks on that list that I emailed, it bounced. So I think I only got through to probably 60% of them. And of course, it was this morning. I haven't heard back. So that is an update on the press release. We have, yeah, again, we have nearly 20 events planned in the next week.
No, that is terrific.
So we can go ahead and I will update folks on these events or call on you if you have an event planned. The first event is actually going to be this Sunday in Spokane. The Peace Justice Action League is hosting a teach-in at the park. I think I saw John Alder on here.
It's Saturday, 2 to 3 p.m.
Saturday.
at the
Okay.
front park.
Thank you.
And you're going to have a couple of VIP guys, George Taylor and Rusty Nelson, speaking at it.
Fantastic. After that, Beth, would you want to talk a bit about the Renton event?
Yes, we will start with a gathering to show our banners on the corner of Rainier Avenue and Grady from 10:30 to 11. And we'll have music. Mike Wold with Just Us Singers will be singing a brilliant song called Jerusalem, as well as some classics like Down by the Riverside and some original songs. Peace Is. So we'll be singing peace songs. And then 11, we'll have several speakers. In addition to Mona and Sean, we have someone new. The president of the Renton Teachers Association will be speaking, and someone from Veterans for Peace and a Marshallese Island youth activist intern, and about the Green New Deal. That's what we're focusing on. And then, so that's what our event is, the teach-in. You could call it a teach-in, the rally. And Mona, do you want to add anything? So Mona will be, yeah.
Well, if you
Thanks.
gotta unmute, Mona.
I don't think she, that's fine.
I said, I think she pretty well covered it. Thank you.
Great. So that's in the morning of the 15th, kicking off tax day itself. That evening, there will be a sine wave in Vancouver. I don't think I see anybody from Vancouver here. A rally in downtown Tacoma. And Julia, would you want to share a bit about Everett?
Sure. Yeah, we're going to have a WPSR speaker, who's also Marshallese. The rally 5 to 6 will be meeting with Congressman Larson's aide at 4:30 in Everett. And I hope we get a good turnout.
Awesome. And Julia, I just confirmed a speaker from Snohomish County DSA as well. So
Great. Okay.
a local labor organizer.
And I just got an idea from Beth to invite a singer, so I might do that as well. It's kind of short notice, but we'll see.
Awesome. Dan, would you want to tell us what's going on in Seattle on the 16th?
Yeah. Well, we have the film showing in Olympia on the 15th.
Yes. And the 16th, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's going to be at Evergreen College, and we're gonna have coverage throughout the college. Hopefully, it's going to be in one of the main hubs. And Hardy has worked on getting the directors of the film festival to appear. I don't know if it's in person or by Zoom. And so, and I stopped by the other day, and when I was getting directions from the teacher, a math teacher, she said, this sounds so good, I'm gonna ask my students to all attend. So we got math students coming at least. So that's good.
Excellent. All right, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, well, our rally will be on the 16th at noon at the Federal Building Plaza. Looks like the weather's going to cooperate. And we have lined up 6 speakers from various groups in our coalition. We have Jim Page as for the music, singing a couple songs. We have I just worked on a press release this afternoon and getting that vetted by some of the speakers, and that should start going out tomorrow from a lot of local places. Veterans for Peace does have a press list of some size, and we're going to use that and see where else we need to send it. And then through the weekend, work on getting the word out in social media and reminding, the folks that we've already sent flyers to make sure they remind other people and come down to the rally.
Excellent, excellent. And I just received word that the Rachel Corrie Foundation will host a vigil around 4:30 on the 15th for Tax Day and also for Palestine. So both very connected issues. Lynn, did you want to share what's going on in Issaquah? Oh, my bad.
Sorry about that. So I thought, oh, am I muted or is it okay?
You're good. You're good.
Oh, good. Okay. We were doing what we thought was an original idea, but found out last night it clearly was not. A penny poll, I guess, is the term for our activity. And so Beth, I reached out to Glenn today, and he was very generous with his time and gave me a little more information. So we're going to have on Thursday between 3:30 and 4:30, we'll have a table set up by the Issaquah City Hall near the bus station or the bus stop. And the table will have a penny poll on it, as well as other information about the federal budget and some other organizations that we support. And you are all probably familiar with a penny poll. I wasn't until earlier today, but just an opportunity to engage with the community and have them kind of realize, like I am now realizing in real time, how much of our tax dollars are spent towards the military and how many other good, great uses there are for our tax dollars. And so it should be a lot of fun. We'll take some pictures and report back. Thanks.
Excellent. Excellent. And Nancy, would you want to talk about waving signs in Bothell?
There, I'm unmuted. We've had quite a time just finding any groups in our area at all. And we are going to go down to a big heavy traffic corner and take a banner and do our signs for whoever shows up. And I think we can wander around the streets after with the flyers. There's always people down in Bothell on a Saturday. So we'll just do what we can do, I guess, for what we've got to work with right now. and it wouldn't be a place to bring songs or anything like that. So it just we'll just be out there. And I think we've found in the process that we really need to be out in this community working harder with maybe Sean suggested maybe even trying to start a group out there. Because there is nothing. It doesn't seem like I can find anything. None of the churches respond, nothing, so yeah. So but we're gonna start, and just to tell people we're here is the first step, I guess. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. And then we have a webinar. Joanne, do you want to talk about the webinar?
Oh, the one on the 20th?
And Patty, put your hand up.
Yeah, we're
Well,
having,
a second, because I know this is but we haven't heard from Goo, and I haven't seen a flyer about his event.
okay.
So I don't know, Goo, do you have a flyer you can just send in to Sean and he can put it on the website?
Unfortunately, not yet. So mentioned before is there's still some kind of issue delayed is moving this association. So instead, I will host this kind of smaller size with my Sunday school high schoolers. So we will make some poster and then some kind of cleanup outside as well. But last this couple of weeks, we have a series of kind of 5-minute brief kind of presentation for our tax money and militarism. And then this Sunday we will have a pretty big event in the Urban Riverside Theater. Maybe about 200 people for the Sewell Ferry tragedy kind of memorial. So I'll set the booth, and then so I will kind of print out these flyers for our kind of event around this here. And then also I translate this media release into Korean and then post this Korean media and for our community as well. Yeah, that's the plan.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Goo. Thank you, Patty, for putting that out. Joanne, did you want to talk about the webinar?
Yeah, the one on the 20th. This is really going to be exciting. Ira Helfand is going to be coming back from Italy. He's going to be speaking to us from his home in Massachusetts. I understand this is the second time he's appearing, at least, because Jim Thomas is his co-presenter. So Ira's going to do his standard presentation on what it's like for a nuclear weapon to go off. And he's done this around the world. He's continually keynoting all over the world. But he does it because he's a doctor. He does it with this very professional, calming way and telling you these horrible details. And so he's very effective. He's also agreed to talk a little bit about a Rotary piece, what he's doing with Rotary, and that's how I've gotten to know him, because Rotary is trying to get Rotary International to buy into the treaty and work with the treaty with the way they worked with polio, which means they practically eliminated polio. So, hey, maybe it'll happen with the treaty. And then the complement is Jim Thomas, and Jim Thomas brings a Washington perspective, and he's absolutely marvelous. I had a chance to talk with him last night for about an hour, and I don't think Ira understands how much has gone on with the work of Jim Thomas, and Jim Thomas is, got inspired because he heard Ira speak. So there's this going to be mutual agreement between them. I just had a notice back from that students, an invitation is going out to, I don't know how wide a group of students, I think it might be campus-wide in the University of Washington, to attend the meeting. So that's going to be great. We're certainly going to announce it at Evergreen. So we're hoping that we'll get student input, and just wish us luck that we got some signups. Then people join. We hope that you would spread this around, because it is a Zoom meeting, and we'd love participation from all over the state.
And we'll make sure to record and send it around as well for folks who aren't able to attend.
Good, thank you.
Have you or will you send out a press release just about that event? I mean, overall, but really highlighting, because I think that could be a draw to some of the reporters. Saturday.
I know it's going out to all the Presbyterians, because they just, at least I'm gonna be making an announcement locally, but they're half of the state is gonna be getting notices for the Presbyterians. And I know, yeah, I did a write-up and we could do a local one, but this isn't a local presentation really, because it's,
No, I think it would be great if you could get that. Maybe could you work with Dan to get his list of media? And then maybe you could just send that. I think that could be a draw.
okay,
Yes.
if
Okay,
Dan,
Dan,
sure, is Dan on?
Dan Gilman. Yep.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you.
And then we have 2 events in Walla Walla, Washington as well. There's going to be a film screening of Nuclear Savage, the Secrets of Project 4.1 about the nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands, and a rally outside of Kathy McMorris Rogers' office on Earth Day. So that's all. It's all clear who made all the graphics, is organizing down in Walla Walla. Did I miss anything?
Did you mention the meaningful movies?
No, somebody mention it.
Yeah.
Okay, so on Thursday night at 6 p.m. on Zoom, we'll be screening a film called Dear President Biden, that asks President Biden to declare a climate emergency and stop, the expansion of fossil fuels, et cetera. And so afterwards, we'll have a panel. We'll have somebody from Veterans for Peace speaking about their climate and militarism project, and then we'll have people talking about the Green New Deal and nuclear weapons, and so we'll have a panel and discussion after the movie. So it's on Zoom. We've registered it, so you can find out more details and the Zoom link on the Tax Day to Earth Day link. But thanks for reminding us of that. And also the Sunrise Movement in Issaquah and Seattle are having a climate emergency rally and teach-in. The one is Friday at 4 to 5 p.m. at the Federal Building. And I did contact them to ask them if they wanted other supporters, and they said they did. Yes, to get more people are welcome. You don't have to be a young person or just have a sign about climate emergency. We're all welcome to that, they said. So I'm planning to go. Federal Building. Yeah, they didn't register it because it's not exactly, I don't know, they're doing it on their own, but yeah. So.
Do we want to add that to the list? Isn't it going to be in front of Kim Schreier's office?
Oh, you're talking, there's 2 different ones.
Oh,
One's
okay.
in Issaquah and one's in downtown Seattle. The
Right,
one
right.
I saw the one in Issaquah just today when I saw Bill's email, but I got a notice from 350 or something from the one in downtown Seattle at the Federal Building, which is
Right.
different. It's for the senators.
Right.
Because they're trying
Do
to
we-
get Senator Murray to support it.
Do we want to add the Issaquah one in front of Kim Schreier's office to the list?
I would want to ask the organizers if they want us to add it.
Yeah.
How do you want it? Should I just send you the information, Sean, and you can reach out to Stacy Oakes? That's how I heard about it.
Okay.
I know
Yeah.
Stacey.
Yeah, I would think that she wouldn't mind, but you're absolutely right. Always good to ask. I know I'll be attending the one Friday in Issaquah because she invited 350 East Side folks to attend, and I think it'd be good to get the word out. It should be a good teach-in.
Yeah, if folks have the capability to do that, I don't believe I have the bandwidth
Yeah.
tomorrow. So
What would you like us to do, Sean?
if someone wants to reach out to the group and show them how to
Okay.
submit the event, we can do that.
Okay, I'll reach out to Stacy Oakes for the Issaquah event.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the Seattle event. Is that including the senators' offices?
Well, they're doing it down on the plaza. I don't know if they're actually getting inside the building, but it's focused on the senators.
Okay.
Right.
Because that's where their offices are. But they're having a teach-in outside. That's, and I don't know if they'll be allowed in or have a meeting. That would be more private, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. My question for the group is, can anyone attend an additional event can you go to an event outside your district and support one of the organizers you see on this call?
Well, we're going to.
John, that would be a long drive for you, so no worries.
Well, if it's on Zoom, I could try.
Okay. So, and Nancy, you're up for.
I'm going to Julia's for one, and probably Friday too, down at the federal building, yeah.
Excellent.
Well, we're going to the one down in the federal building, but I don't drive a car, so I don't think I'll be going anything outside the district.
Well, that's still great.
I'll be attending a lot by Zoom just because of the distance and stuff. And then I know Kathy, maybe Mona, you know any of this, but I know that they had tried to get something around Derek's office over in the peninsula. Yeah.
Kathy and the folks from Ground Zero are going to join the Tacoma event.
I thought they were going to have their event. The Ground Zero are going to have hand out leaflets and flyers on to people getting on the ferry in downtown Bremerton.
Good.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, last I heard though, they're going to come. Kathy's going to come speak in Tacoma as well, so that will be good.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you, folks who can travel around. Yeah, it's really helpful to help each other.
Those handouts and flyers are just awesome. So thank you very much.
Well, all right, folks. This is going to be our largest action ever.
Yeah, this is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I think everybody's to be congratulated in this. So
I just have a quick question. I realize people have been asking, what's next? So when Mona or people give the closing speech to say, go to the other events, what should we invite them to come to the next Washington Against Nuclear Weapons meeting? I'm sort of asking this to everyone. How are you planning to close this event and plan what's next? Because we don't want it just to be a one-off, obviously. What we just heard from David Vine was we need to build this movement. You know, the peace and climate people, is this a one-time date or is this we're going to go forward? And I would suggest people join organizations. Like, for example, I work with 350 Federal Policy. So anybody who wants to meet with their Congress members about these bills can work with 350 Federal Policy, because we're going to be, I forgot to mention this, we're going to be meeting with Marilyn Strickland's staff. Something.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah. So we've got some people in Olympia. So join organizations, in each other's organizations, whether it's a climate group or a peace group. 350 is getting more, seeing the connections between militarism and war and the climate. So that's really, we need to continue this. So that's just, I want to put in my 2 cents and ask a question. Maybe at the next meeting that could be on the agenda as far as reflecting. Are we going to do this again next year? And how's it going to be bigger and better? So
yeah, and I work on the agriculture food policy group with 350, just similar to what you are in, and that is totally connected with any nuclear exchange anywhere. I mean, we would be lacking a third of the food that we have on Earth right now if we have one exchange. I understand. So yeah, I mean,
I just thought of something based on the talk that we heard by David, that maybe there should be at some point in a big theater downtown Seattle or someplace where we invite many groups to join in some kind of an event. 350, Ground Zero, Washington Nuclear Weapons, whoever we can think of, to a large event, maybe next year or, several months down the, somehow connecting all the groups together.
and we have Seattle Town Hall too. That might be a place to do something like that.
Yeah.
Big,
John, I know you've had your hand up for a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's let you know, PGLs is using their FCNL connection. We've been reaching out to the 2 senators and Kathy McMorris Rogers with both visits and postcards. Well, I'm going to say one thing that was very disturbing about Kathy McMorris Rogers. She has a lot of these windows on her office, and every part of it has got a picture of Israeli hostages, none of any Palestinian hostages. So she seems to be very pro-Israel, which is a very serious concern. But we're still working on that. We have our members meeting on the 16th. I'm going to bring up what we're doing with FCL at that meeting. And we're still going to maybe try to work a group letter to the editor about reducing the military and getting a ceasefire in Palestine.
Excellent. Excellent.
So I wanted to mention, yeah, Resist U.S. led war. They had a big, wonderful event on yesterday on Zoom. It was about cancel RIMPAC, and it talked about all the different military bases on the Pacific Rim. And when we were listening to the talk tonight about the military industrial complex. I mean, that's just one section of the world that has so many military bases and, a lot of things going on. So also we want to include Resist U.S. led war. They have they're young people and they have a lot going on. So
Absolutely. Lynn.
Just real quickly, we thought the best way we could continue the momentum is to have exactly what you said, sign-up sheets. And so we're going to have a couple sign-up sheets so that people, if they're engaged, they can sign up in that moment for Washington Against Nuclear Weapons, 350 Eastside, and a few other organizations. I think once you get them looped in, I think then the momentum continues.
Excellent. So folks, the Washington Against Nuclear Weapons strategy is to build power in every congressional district and bring that power to bear. So what I would ask folks to do at their events is to share, tinyurl.com/text-earth. Get as many people as possible to send letters to their member of Congress. If people are a part of an organization, ask them to pass a resolution to move the money. We want to bring in unions. We want to bring in more Rotary groups. We want to bring in anybody we can to this movement because we have to build bigger. Now, this is a step one or a step two, but I really believe that our focus should be building towards something even larger. Most likely next year, or perhaps in August. Patty.
Yeah, I just want to affirm what was that Lynn that said about the sign-up sheets. And I think if there's some way on the Zooms too to capture that website or capture other websites that people can click into on the chat. Because I think we're trying to build this grassroots, and I think that we need to have as many different perspectives and different ways of saying the same thing. So the beauty of this event this week and beyond is that it's not just one group, it's a variety of groups. Like Goo, I think Goo, you're just a perfect example, I think, of a new group of people that will say things, in Korean. I mean, I think that's so that's all I had to say. But just the sign-ins, I think, so however we can get people to, like you say, they want to have more. And it's almost like where this could be a build-in for the Hope to Hiroshima in August. So this group could be, a buildup of that as well. And I know that the universities, and that's great, whoever said the UW, I think that was you, Joanne, is going to be sending this out. I forgot to mention that Seattle U is, I've sent along these posters, these flyers, which I think the most important thing about the flyer is the information that people can gather and do what they want to do in their way with the information. So, so then the question is, how do we come back and share the information we get? We are going to have a follow-up Zoom on the 23rd to kind of go over how everything went with the same, and I'll send out a reminder. but I don't know how we might, so people just kind of think about how you want to maybe gather the sign-ins, and then you create your own sign-in or something, so it's an easier way to, because you're right, some people might want to just get involved with 350, others don't want to get in, WANW yet, so just some thoughts about that.
So Sean,
Mona, I think Mary has her hand up, so.
I just want to let people know that we will have the lantern floating from Hiroshima to Hope on August 6th again this year. And I've been saying this for a long time, but each group is invited to come, have a table, have literature, but most importantly, the weather will be good and we can have that all important face-to-face connection with each other from this group and also with people who are coming in new. It just feels so much different when you're with 1,000 to 2,000 people who understand that more killing is not going to stop killing. And it's such a great event. There are many